The crowd gathered around rows of mysterious boxes and trailers as the auctioneer's voice boomed across Misty Ranchard. Sold to the gentleman in blue hat for $300. The gavel struck down with finality off to the side. I watched as Karen Whitmore stormed through the gate. Her face is red as the stop sign. She'd just blown past those belonged to my neighbors. She shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at the items being loaded on trucks. But it was till the teeth gavel had already spoken and every single item was finding a new home. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up auctioning off half the neighborhood spleen. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, my name is David Martinez and inherited a massive ranch from my uncle. About 3 years ago, the property came with a huge barn and several unused outbuildings that I hadn't quite figured out what to do with yet. The ranch sat right on the edge of Willowbrook as to test a suburban development with one of those HOA organizations that seemed to have rules about everything from mailbox coolers to how tall your grass could grow. About 18 months ago, Karen approached me at the local coffee shop. She was the whole president and had what she called a brilliant community initiative. The neighborhood needed a place to store emergency supplies, she explained, batting her eyelashes and speaking in that syrupy sweet tone that should have been me. First warning, just a small corner of your barn for some water bottles and first aid kits. She said, being the neighborly type, one agreed with a handshake deal. No money would change hands. Just a simple arrangement to help the community prepare for emergencies. The first few months went exactly as planned. A couple of pallets of water bottles appeared along with some boxes labeled emergency medical supplies and disaster food rations. I checked on them occasionally and felt good about doing my part for the neighborhood. But then things started to change one day and noticed a jet ski parked next to the emergency supplies. Then came a vintage motorcycle. Before long, my barn looked less like an emergency preparedness center and more like a storage facility. By month 6, I counted 3 both scandalous pieces of furniture boxes labeled Christmas decorations, at least for riding lawnmowers that clearly were in mine, and even a classic 1967 Mustang under a tarp. The emergency supplies had been pushed into a tiny corner, overwhelmed by what was obviously personal property belonging to various HOA members. I knew it was time to have a conversation with Karen. I found her at next HOA meeting, which I attended specifically to address this issue. Karen, we need to talk about the barn situation, said calmly after the meeting concluded. She looked at me with that fake smile plastered across her face. Oh, David, isn't it wonderful how the community has embraced our storage initiative, she replied. I explained that our agreement was for emergency supplies only, not personal property storage. Her smile never wavered as she delivered the most infuriating response I'd ever heard. Well, David, you never objected before, so legally that's considered implied consent. Besides, this is all community property now. The HOA has determined Thatcher's storage benefits everyone. She actually had the audacity to pat Miss Hooder condescendingly. Don't worry, you're pretty little head about it. We're taking care of everything. That's when I noticed something else. Tom Henderson from Oak Street mentioned Ed paying his monthly storage fee, and my ears perked up immediately. Over the next few days, I did some investigating. It turned out Karen had been charging HOA members $50 per month to store items in what she was calling the community storage facility. She was pocketing the money as an administrative fee for managing the space, my private property, that I'd never given her permission to rent out. The rage that built up inside me was unlike anything he'd ever experienced, but I kept my cool. He'd learned long ago that the best revenge is served with proper documentation. I went home and pulled out me property deed along with every piece of correspondence I'd ever had with the HOA. There was nothing in writing a booth storage arrangement, and certainly nothing that gave Karen or the HOA an illegal right to use my property as a commercial storage facility. I also discovered that several insurance and liability issues were at play here. If Samian got hurt on my property, or if any of these items were damaged or stolen, guess who would be held responsible? That's right, me. I consulted with my lawyer, Jean Rodriguez, who nearly choked on her coffee when I explained the situation. David, you need to put a stop to this immediately, she said. The liability alone could bankrupt you. She helped me draft a formal note to the HOA and all individuals with property stored in my barn. The letter was clear. Everyone had 30 days to remove their belongings, or the items would be considered abandoned property under state law. I hand-delivered the note to Karen's house on a Tuesday morning. She answered the door in her bathrobe quickly, not expecting visitors. What's this? She asked, snatching the envelope from my hand. I waited while she read it, watching her face transformed from confusion to anger to something approaching panic. You can't do this, she screamed. The HOA has an agreement with you. I remained calm and simply stated that no such legal agreement existed, and that she had 30 days to coordinate the removal of all of them. Karen immediately went into damage control mode. She called an emergency home meeting and told everyone that I was being unreasonable and trying to hurt the community. She assured the residents that I wouldn't dare follow through on me threat. He's just posturing. I heard her tell Margaret Sullivan at the grocery store. David's too nice to actually do anything, just ignore the letter. This was exactly what I'd hoped it would do as the 30-day deadline approached. I started documenting. I took detailed photographs of every single item in my barn, created an inventory list, and even had a professional appraiser come out to estimate values. I also placed several ads in local newspapers and online platforms announcing an upcoming auction off abandoned property. The legal notices are written exactly as my lawyer instructed, making it clear that all items had been abandoned on private property and would be sold at the highest bidder 3 days before that deadline. A few nervous HOA members showed up to collect their belongings and help them load their items and had them sign a receipt acknowledging gratitude, but the vast majority of that stuff remained, including Karen's own collection of antique furniture that's been storing for her daughter's future apartment. She was still telling people I was bluffing, that there was no way I'd actually go through with an auction the morning of the auction. I had everything pulled out of the barn and arranged in neat rows across there in charge of the auctioneer. I'd hired Bob Thompson, was a veteran of the business and knew exactly how to handle the situation. We'd already briefed the local sheriff's department about the event just in case there were any disturbances. People started arriving with their bidding paddles. I spotted several HOA members mixed in with the crowd off bargain hunters. What the hell is this? Shouted Marcus Chin, pointing at his jet ski with a lot number taped to it. I calmly handed him a printed copy of the abandonment notice and the state law regarding unclaimed property. You had 30 days to retrieve your belongings. Marcus, the deadline passed 3 days ago. Everything here is now legally considered abandoned property. The look on his face was priceless, a mixture of shock and dawning realization that I was completely serious. More HOA member Serapha's word spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Karen's phone was ringing constantly as angry residents demanded answers. She hadn't shown up yet, but I knew she would. The auction began promptly at 10 o'clock. In that morning, Bob's voice carried across the yard as he started with smaller items, boxes of decorations and tools that went for $20 or $30 each. The crowd was enthusiastic and bidding was competitive. Out and are into the auction. Karen's white Mercedes screeched in the midway. She jumped out waving a piece of paper and marched straight toward the auctioneer's podium. Stop this immediately, she screamed. I have a cease and desist order. Bob paused and looked at me. I walked over and examined the paper, which appeared to be something printed from a legal website and filled in herself. It had no court seal, no judge's signature, nothing that would make it legally binding. Ma'am, this is a valid legal document, the sheriff's deputy said. After examining it, this auction is perfectly legal. These folks have all the proper permits and follow all required procedures. Karen's face went from red to purple. But that's whole property, she continued to protest. The deputy shook his head. According to the documentation, Martinez provided these items were abandoned on his private property after proper notice was given, as within his rights to dispose of them as he sees